I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation is the mysterious and heartbreaking disappearance of the Skelton brothers, 3 young boys from Michigan who've been missing for more than 14 years. And their father won't say where they are and has not been charged with their murders. Here's the story. Tanner, Alexander, and Andrew Skelton, 3 young, healthy boys growing up in the heartland of America. They were being raised in Morenci, Michigan, a small town near the Ohio state line. Their parents were going through a divorce and a custody battle in the fall of 2010. Their mother, Tanya Zuvers, had custody, but the boys were visiting with their father, John Skelton, for Thanksgiving. Tanya was supposed to get the boys back on Black Friday. She tried calling John, but could not track him down, so she drove to his house. No one was there. John was at the hospital being treated for an injured ankle, but did not tell her where the boys were. Tanya called police, and an Amber Alert was issued. When police searched John's house, they found it destroyed inside. When questioned, John gave varying stories about where the boys were. John was eventually prosecuted for charges related to the boys, but none of those charges were homicide. And he has served more than a decade in prison and will be released in 2025. Their mother has gone to court trying to get the boys declared dead. Meanwhile, Tanner, Alexander, and Andrew are still missing. 3 boys, all 3 of them, gone, vanished, haven't been declared dead yet. Mom wants that to happen. We'll talk about that in a bit. But to look at the story and try to understand and figure out what happened here and why the case hasn't been solved, why they haven't figured out what happened to the boys, brings us to the first question of our investigation. And I think this is an important one to get things rolling, which is, when did the boys disappear? What were the circumstances surrounding it? Where were they? When was the last time they were seen? You nail that down, I think that leads to the rest of the investigation. Joining me tonight to help us through all this, former homicide detective with more than 20 years experience. You know him very well. Phil Waters is with us, and crime writer and host of the podcast True Crime Garage, Nick Edwards, is here as well. Great to have you both as we work through this here tonight. I want to begin by going through a little bit of a timeline that we've put together here just to get things rolling. And we begin on November 25th of 2010. The brothers, Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner, last seen in their father's backyard. That's in Morenci, Michigan. The next day, on the 26th, John Skelton's cell phone is tracked, leaving his home in Morenci and traveling to Holiday City, Ohio, and then returning back to Morenci. Now, Tanya Zuvers, his wife or ex-wife, estranged wife, is supposed to get the boys back from her ex-husband, John Skelton, but he's not answering her calls. Tanya then goes to John's house, but he's not there. John is in the hospital with a broken ankle, and he tells healthcare workers that he injured it while trying to take his own life. Police then enter John's house. The house is in disarray. I mean, it's destroyed, and the boys are not inside. All right, Nick Edwards, I'll begin with you. What else do we know about this time period, the 25th to the 26th? What's going on in the life of John Skelton, the boys, and Tanya?
Good evening, Vinny. Yes, it's Thanksgiving. It's supposed to be a great time for everybody, time for family. From my understanding, the boys were last seen. We have a few confirmed sightings of them that Thursday evening. Where things really start to come into question is Friday morning. And like we saw there with the movement of John's phone, that gives us some indicators to what may have happened to these boys, because we can assume he's with his phone, and his phone is moving a lot that morning. In fact, there's 76 minutes in question where we don't know what he was up to. And he's just south of the Michigan state line. So what was he doing during that 76 minutes, and why couldn't he get these boys back to their mother that afternoon?
Yeah, and you're talking about 3 boys. I mean, the potential here for 3 homicides. They're obviously young at the time, but still, it's 3. So, Phil, approaching this case, initially and now so many years later, in trying to piece together what happened, what are the challenges? What is the approach?
Well, good evening, Vinnie, Nick. I'll tell you, this is an interesting case. It's got a lot of moving parts. And to begin this missing person case, my curiosity is it still being considered a missing person case, or has it been moved to the realm of homicide? I've worked these types of cases where the missing person detective contacts us and says, look, this is not going the way we think it's going to go. So to try to rebuild this case, Nick's done a pretty good job here just outlining the beginning of the timeline, and I'm all about timelines. So what strikes me is that this time that he's missing, in effect, he's gone across the state line into Ohio. So let's presume at this moment that we've got 3 homicides here. So did he murder the boys in Michigan, take them to Ohio and get rid of the bodies? Or did he murder the boys in Ohio and get rid of the bodies in Ohio? So you've got jurisdictions here involved. I'm assuming that at the beginning of this, that we have all these agencies involved in this missing person investigation. So I'm just struck by the pieces that we don't have, and you have to go back and rebuild the timeline to see if there was something that was missed. And with the technology today, I don't know the capabilities of going back 14 years to be able to draw those, maybe some data that wasn't available at that time. What kind of a vehicle was he in? Was there any kind of a GPS setup on that vehicle in that year? So a lot of things that we have technologically that might be able to apply to this case.
You know, I want to show everyone a map so you have some idea what we're talking about here. Morenci, Michigan to Holiday City, Ohio is 24.3 miles. And when we talk about this part of the country, and the images that I've seen, Nick, it seems like there's a lot of rural areas here. There's no major cities. I see a lot of green. It just seems like there's a lot of potential places that someone could stop.
And Phil's exactly right in his thoughts. With this being a missing persons case, if it's a homicide case, where were the boys killed? You would think that if they were killed in Michigan and then transported, that there would be some evidence to suggest that to investigators. We know that they searched John Skelton's home very shortly afterwards. I don't know that if they searched his vehicle or not, but to speak to that area specifically, that rural area there, that's right off of I-80. So a lot could have happened if he wanted to transport them somewhere.
Now, there's something else I want to show you, Phil, and I always thought this was very, very significant in this case. A Facebook post made by John on Wednesday, November 24th. So this would be before Thanksgiving and presumably before the last sighting of the boys, where John Skelton is from WXYZ, posted, "I love my wife very much. May God and Tanya forgive me." For what, right? We know that there's this very contentious breakup. There's apparently some bad blood, but he's saying, "I love my wife very much." What are your thoughts, Phil, about trying to get inside the mind of this man?
Well, this is what I always did in an investigation, was to put together a psychological autopsy. And this guy, this particular message here in my world, I would consider that an admission of some kind. He's either done something or he's going to do something. And now he's reaching out and he's asking for forgiveness. So to me, that's an admission. And then when you go to this business about going to the hospital because he broke his ankle and he told him that he did it trying to commit suicide, well, so then the next question I have is, well, did anybody ask him, where did this happen? What was the initial information that was placed into that into the report that they took at the, I'm assuming at the ER? Was law enforcement contacted? So there's a lot of missing parts here that we just don't know if anything resulted from them, and they're kind of in isolation. So I think that this message he sent, the statement he makes at the hospital, the fact that he's out of pocket for all this time, he's not able to explain anything. And then when you get, I'm sure you're going to get to it about the, I gave it to some strange Amish woman. So, gave him to some, it's just a bizarre story.
Well, Phil and Nick are going to stick around. We've got more to get to. Coming up next, why haven't these boys been declared dead?
Just because people are saying they're making it a murder investigation does not mean that they hit the person dead.
Some days it seems like it's been forever.
Do you think your boys are still with us?
I play that in my mind all the time. Logic tells me that no.
When a parent loses a child, I mean, it's horrendous. But imagine losing all three at once. Like they've vanished. They've been gone for 14 years now. 14 years, that's a long time. No proof of life at any moment in those 14 years. Which brings me to the next question in our investigation. Why haven't they been declared dead? I know it's sad to think about it. I know you want to keep your hope alive, but Mom believes that they are dead. Like, at what point? What does it take? No proof of life, 14 years, 3 of them, 3, all at once. Joining me, Michigan attorney known as Big Case Mike. Mike Jaffer is with us, and the chief public defender for Oakland County, Michigan, Paulette Lofton. Great to have you both here. Mike, what are your thoughts here about why hasn't this happened?
I think this is ridiculous. I think they should have been declared dead. I mean, there's a difference, obviously, between declaring them dead in a probate instance and then in a criminal arena. If you look at this case long enough, Vinny, a part of your soul dies, right? Simply. Even me reading about the case, these 3 boys disappeared. They were 9, 7, and 5. I have 3 kids. They're 9, 7, and 5 today, right? So a part of your soul just dies when you look at this case. I could only imagine that the reason that the state of Michigan has not brought murder charges because the prosecution is just gun shy, right? Because at the end of the day, this case has everything, right? These boys are dead, right? The principle of logic, Occam's razor, that says the most likely explanation to a complex situation is usually the most obvious solution. That's the explanation, right? Do we actually believe that these kids were given to a lady on the side of the street or taken to an underground situation where there's somebody raising them? People have a hard time raising their own kids, let alone the 3 kids of a stranger who were allegedly molested by their mom and then kidnapped by their dad, who also is a monster, right? I think these boys should have been declared dead. I think that her probate petition is going to be approved. But it's a different situation, obviously, than having criminal charges come at them.
Yeah, and Paulette, that hearing is supposed to come. It's been delayed a few times. The petition to try to get, and that's got to be difficult for a parent. Like going to have someone say that they're dead. You never want to give up hope. But these 3 children were young when this happened 14 years ago. The oldest would now be like 23 years old. I can't imagine. There's no circumstance that I can think of, as tragic as it is, that these boys are alive.
I agree. Here in Michigan, usually a doctor or a medical examiner declares death. They decide the cause of death and the manner of death. Because here there've been no remains. There was no bodies. No one was charged with homicide of these three boys. It never happened. So that is why now mom has made the decision to ask a probate judge to make that determination, because here in Michigan, a probate judge is able to make that determination if the person has been missing for 7+ years, or if it is very clear that something happened that caused the death of an individual. So I think I agree. I think this petition is going to be granted. I do think, based on some of the comments that Dad made, that he was just trying to get them out of mom's care and custody until they turned 18. Well, like you just said, I think the oldest one is now mid-20s. So that excuse or that explanation doesn't seem to make sense. So I think mom now, after these 14 years, I think this is the right decision for her to try to at least get some closure and move forward.
I want you to take a listen to John Skelton, the father. This is a phone interview with a reporter from WXYZ.
Just because people are saying they're making it a murder investigation does not mean that the boys are dead.
Why do you think they've switched this to a murder investigation? What do you think leads them to believe that your kids are dead?
There's nobody to collaborate, seeing them. There's no pictures of these people. We covered our text too well.
Well, that part, Mike, does sound true, covering tracks, because this is a situation where his home was completely destroyed, right? It was in shambles inside that home, right? But they didn't really uncover anything that would tell investigators that something necessarily happened to the boys. But there's three of them, from like 9, 7, and 5 at the time, I believe, or about the ages of these 3 boys. They're not going to be runaways. They're not. No one's raising them. Everything points in one direction, but it seems some tracks were covered here.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I could understand that investigators did not want to presume them dead, obviously, after they did the initial investigation, right? 14 years ago, 12 years ago, even 10 years ago. But 8 years ago and after that, I mean, it's ridiculous for anyone to think that these young men are still alive, right? The oldest kid was 9 when he was supposedly taken to an underground cult, right? 9. So he knew he had a mom. He knew what she looked like. He knew literally how her voice sounded, right? There are kids who are born through IVF who, once they find out that their actual parents are not their real parents, they crawl over broken glass to find the parent. The oldest kid, if he was alive, he would have found his mom a long time ago, right? But I could understand investigators not jumping to that conclusion. When the initial investigation happened, it made total sense. But right now, I mean, this is ridiculous. These kids are gone, right? Anybody who believes that these kids are still alive with an underground cult, I mean, you might as well believe that they're living with Bigfoot. There's just no other explanation other than these boys perished. Question of where and when is a different issue.
Absolutely. And Paul, that's such a great point that Mike made about the oldest being 9, right? 9 years old, you remember, you know your name. He's 23 now, and they know about the internet. This story is everywhere on the internet. So it just seems like, can we inject a little common sense, and sooner rather than later, to make this official, and maybe the family can have some sort of a service or something to recognize the passing of these 3 young boys.
I agree. I mean, I think the investigation, we have to remember 14 years ago, there wasn't a camera on everybody's door. There wasn't a camera on every corner on the highway. Cell searching for cell phone records was much less prevalent. People weren't on, social media all the time. People weren't using Google on their phones every second of every day. So I think the investigation, if it took place today, would be much different. But I agree. This has been so long. There is no way that there wouldn't have been a sighting, or, the child, after growing up and reaching the age of 18, didn't break free and look for his mom. I mean, it's still in the news every single year here in Michigan on the day that they were reported missing. So there's no way that they could still be living in Ohio or somewhere here in Michigan. I agree.
And It's a classic case, Mike, where it's a custody battle, and we cover a lot of these stories, unfortunately, on Court TV. Sometimes it's a spouse that gets murdered, and sometimes it's a child who loses their life. But you look at this, even the circumstances surrounding this also points in that direction.
Oh, yeah, completely agree, right? Completely agree with that, because at the end of the day, this is just a completely classic case. Because here's the thing, right? My co-panelist mentioned, you know, how there wasn't like a camera on every door and like it is now, right? There's been an evolution in the way criminal cases like this have been looked at, right? If this was not in 2025, if it was in 1925, you have way more than enough evidence to charge this person with murder, right? In 1925, you wouldn't have known that he took the kids on his horse and buggy and crossed state lines to Ohio. You know that now, right? 1925, all you know is these boys were in your custody and then they disappeared, right? You still have enough, in my opinion, to know that these boys were murdered, right? But we're in 2025. These kids would have found their mom.
Absolutely.
The oldest kid was not. So,
all
yeah,
right.
I mean, no, this is great.
Mike and Paulette, we've got more to talk about. When we come back, what is John Skelton's story? I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the disappearance of the Skelton brothers, missing since 2010. And the one man who could solve this mystery quickly will not tell anyone where they are, their own father. Here's the story. John Skelton and Tanya Zuvers were going through a bitter divorce and custody battle in 2010. They had 3 young boys, Tanner, Alexander, and Andrew. John had visitation with the boys for Thanksgiving, but when Tanya went to pick them up, they were nowhere to be found. John has provided several stories about what happened. He's also been in prison for more than a decade for child imprisonment charges. The boys have never been found, and Tanya wants them to finally be declared dead. Meanwhile, John Skelton is going to be released from prison in 2025. Where are the Skelton brothers, and what happened to them? It's a big fact here. Their father's getting out. He's been locked up for a while, for quite a while, more than a decade. He's been behind bars, charges related to the children, but not homicide charges, and he's getting out. And when this first happened, he did speak. He didn't remain completely silent, which brings us to the next question in our investigation, which is, what is John Skelton's story? The kids were with him on Thanksgiving. That is clear. That is uncontroverted. So what's his story about his 3 little boys? Where are they? Joining me, former homicide detective with more than 20 years of experience, Phil Waters, and crime writer, host of the podcast True Crime Garage, Nick Edwards. Okay, he has spoken, so I want everyone to hear a little bit of what he had to say here. Tom Waite from WXYZ spoke to him a few years ago, right, about his children. Let's take a listen.
Just because people are saying they're making it a murder investigation does not mean that the boys are dead.
Only on 7, a jailhouse telephone interview with John Skelton after he learns that Morency's police chief is investigating his son's disappearance as murder.
Why do you think they've switched this to a murder investigation? What do you think leads them to believe that your kids are dead?
There's nobody to collaborate, seeing them. There's no pictures of these people. We covered our text too well.
Skelton, who last saw the boys alive here on Thanksgiving at his home in Morency, tells Action News he gave his sons to a group called Underground Sanctuary. He says it was to protect them from his wife, Tanya.
The boys told me that Tanya was, they quoted, sexing them, which I tried to confirm with Tanya, but Tanya wouldn't have anything to do with me. She wouldn't talk to me about it or anything, and alienated me and started alienating the kids from me and stuff. And I have to go with I don't think my kids will buy to me.
So, Nick, the story that he's telling is that Tanya is sexting their children, their boys, or at least one of their boys. She does have a little bit of a history, not with her own children, but with a 14-year-old, I think in the late 90s, right?
Yes, and Vinny, she was a registered sex offender. So there is some weight to his story, at least the story that he's telling people. And I mean, Phil has this completely right. We could really analyze this and psychologically break this down and break down John Skelton for 30, 60 minutes straight and really come to some great ideas about what probably happened logically. I do want to point out something, though, too. Being involved with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children for many years, I have seen and heard some amazing stories of children coming home that nobody ever thought would ever return home. And they did many, many years later. So while logic tells us that this is the right avenue to pursue and that this is probably a homicide case, I do want to leave the light on just a little bit because there are those miracle stories out there.
Phil Waters, what are your thoughts about this story that he's telling? The underground sanctuary.
Well, I'm not. I read something about the Amish connection here. There's a lot of leads to be followed. I mean, his story. Look, he's had. I don't know what the initial interview. That is critical to an investigation like this. So whatever was conveyed there, and that I think that was the initial story, that this strange woman they didn't know, and that she underground bunkers and all this kind of nonsense, and then later on it sometimes materializes into some sort of an Amish thing. So, and as a detective, you've got to follow all those leads. There's Amish communities throughout, I think, 3 or 4 state region there, and you've got to follow. You've got to go to each one of those communities and say, look, did something like this happen? Do you remember anything? So forth and so on. So you have to go down these bunny trails that hopefully are going to bring you back around to the truth. Now, his story, again, when he talks about in the interview, and he says, we really covered our tracks well. Well, I'm going to tell you, to me, that is another admission. Yeah, he covered his tracks well. He's murdered these 3 boys, and he's put them someplace where he feels very comfortable that they will never be recovered. So he's had time to get his story down pat, and he has accomplished that. Now, it's going to be interesting to see when he gets out, when he's released, there's going to be a cacophony of reporters, I'm sure, heading to the gate that he's getting released from to interview him, to talk to him. And so it's going to be interesting to see what his response is to now this newfound attention on him and on this case. So I'm going to be very curious to see how he responds to that.
Yeah, that's a game-changing moment. I mean, I could see him ending up on a podcast, perhaps Nick's podcast. I mean, I could see that happening where he's going to want the opportunity. He has spoken before to reporters. The world of true crime has changed immensely, and stories like this continue to garner attention. And he seems like a guy who wants to proclaim his innocence. Here's something from Click on Detroit, Local 4, from February 5th, 2018. Skelton claims he sent the boys to live with a new family. He claims he gave the boys to 2 women and a man in his 60s. John said the boys were going to live on a farm in Ohio along the Indiana border after he made arrangements with a group he calls the Underground Sanctuary. John said he told the boys they would have a better life with a new family who would buy them the farm boots they had been asking for and let them ride on a tractor whenever they wanted. Now, the one thing about this, Nick, you're talking about the Indiana border with Ohio. Is there any evidence that he went there? I know he crossed from Michigan into Ohio. And it's very specific here. But he does use this phrase, to live on a farm. And any young person who's had a pet that has passed away when they were a child knows where that pet ended up, living on a farm somewhere. What are your thoughts about this statement, Nick?
Well, I'm an Ohio boy, and there are certainly a lot of farms in that area along the Ohio and Indiana border. The area where his phone traveled to on Black Friday, after, let's say, 12 hours or so, maybe 18 hours after we have last confirmed sightings of the boys being alive, that's the Holiday City area in Ohio. So very rural, as you pointed out, lots of places to conceal and hide things, but also right there near Interstate 80 where there could be some kind of handoff that took place. And as far as John Skelton coming on my podcast, it would take a lot of convincing. I really think that this man has done everything in his power to punish Tanya, punish his ex-wife, and he has continued to punish her for all of these years that these boys have been missing, that he knows the answer to where they are, dead or alive. And him getting out of prison will further punish this woman, and I won't be a part of that or allow him to do it on my show unless he wants to come clean.
Interesting. And Phil, what are your thoughts, though? Because I always think the more they talk, the more there's an opportunity to learn something new that might lead to something. Do you think that's possible here, that he'll get out and he'll want to talk and he may mess up? Or does more than a decade in prison change his approach to speaking about this? And does he just kind of go off the grid somewhere?
Well, I would answer that in this way. Good for Nick. And I would say that anybody that would bring this jackass on their podcast to talk needs to find another job.
What if it's a former member of law enforcement who's going to ask the tough questions?
We got jackasses in law enforcement, so I'm just saying that setting, to give this guy another platform to get out, and this is all for him. Let's not forget what this is all about. This is all about him. He's a sociopath. He feels justified in what he did, whether that was to harm, the ex-wife. Look, this, to me, these types of cases are always a very simple formula. You've got a contentious divorce. It is interesting that in the divorce proceedings that she gets full custody of these kids, even having been a registered sex offender.
Yeah, that does speak volumes. That is such a great point.
Okay, so now he's back trying to get custody and all that. He doesn't get it. She lets him have these kids for Thanksgiving. That's his opportunity. If I can't have him, nobody's going to have him, and you're sure not going to have him, and I'm going to do what I need to do to make sure that happens. So this is to me, it's a pretty simple case in terms of, and it's a I'm not going to say a great circumstantial case. It's a good circumstantial case. It's adequate.
Absolutely.
And you're going to have a prosecutor that's going to have some cojones. Yeah. That's willing to go into court. That's what we need.
And Phil Waters, we're out of time.
This guy.
Hey, cutting you off because I love your insight. Nick Edwards, True Crime Garage. Make sure you download it tonight, folks. Still to come, will John Skelton ever be charged with murder?
How do you know that your husband knows where the kids are at? Has he voiced that he knows where the kids are, or has he always stated from day one that he has?
This is not your opportunity to testify.
Coming soon to Court TV.
It's the biggest story that we're covering.
He is the boogeyman.
Lori Daybell.
She said, I will have you destroyed.
She's got another murder trial coming up.
A social media sensation, now a suspected killer.
We will not stop fighting. We have no quit.
Sean Diddy Combs arrested on a federal indictment.
The high-stakes trials you don't want to miss. Coming soon, only on Court TV.
How do you know that your husband knows where the kids are at? Has he voiced any that he knows where the kids are, or has he always stated from day one that he has?
This is not your opportunity to testify. The question is, do you believe that your husband knows where the children are? Yes, I do.
Do you believe the children are safe?
No, because they're not with your parent.
Is it your opinion that the boys are still alive? Judge.
What a bizarre moment that was. John Skelton representing himself in family court, questioning his ex. It was a bizarre situation. You could see how tense it was inside that courtroom. Now, he's been locked up. So what's he locked up for? What has he been and is he locked up for? This is from the Michigan Department of Corrections. John Russell Skelton. Location, Bellamy Creek Correctional Facility. Sentence 1, unlawful imprisonment. Sentence 2, unlawful imprisonment. Sentence 3, unlawful imprisonment. That's one count for each child. Tanner, Alexander, and Andrew. But this is the part I want you to pay attention to. On the bottom, release date, November 29th, 2025. They can't keep him any longer. He's maxing out. He has not been paroled. He's been locked up the whole time, but he's getting out. Then what? Brings me to our next question in our investigation. Will John Skelton ever be charged with murder? We've seen plenty of cases and trials where people have been charged where the victim's body or the victim's remains have not been recovered. Will John Skelton ever be charged with murder? Joining me, Michigan attorney known as Big Case Mike. Mike Jafer is with us. Also, the chief public defender for Oakland County, Michigan, Paulette Lofton. All right, Paulette, what's going to happen here? Prosecutors, investigators going to just sit back and wait, or take it to the grand jury, see what the grand jury has to say now before he gets released? What do you think?
Well, a grand jury is not used that often in Michigan. I am surprised after seeing him representing himself, doing a strange phone interview with Channel 7 News here, that there hasn't been a situation where an inmate that he has been housed with has come forward and said he confessed. That is usually what happens. You get too comfortable, you think someone is your friend, and obviously this case made national news. Everyone knows that the police are still searching for the bodies of these 3 boys. So anyone in prison with Mr. Skelton is going to have in the back of their mind, oh my goodness, I could get a reduced sentence if I could get Mr. Skelton to tell me where these bodies are. So I'm actually shocked that that did not happen. But now he's set to be released. And I think, as you said in your previous segment, it's really going to depend on what he does when he is released. As we've seen, especially recently, like Gypsy Rose, O.J. Simpson, when people are released, sometimes they want to be in the media. They want to write a book. They want to go on a podcast. They want to tell their story. So if that happens, it is very, very possible that he is going to say something that he can't walk back or retract. And then that either leads the police to a different area to search or a different lead to look into. And then they may be able to charge him with homicide at that point. But I think it's going to depend on him, because even if they find the remains at this point, they're so badly decayed. Are we going to be able to say how these boys died or that it was him that did it? Probably not.
Mike, what are your thoughts here? So many years later.
I think they should bring charges, and I'll tell you why, right? My plea to any prosecutor who's looking at this case is don't look at reasons not to bring these charges. Look at reasons to bring these charges, right? You can't, don't look at the reasons the things that make you fearful of bringing charges. Just bring the charges, because at the end of the day, the interests of justice are going to be, pushed forward if you bring charges. Think about it. If you're worried about double jeopardy applying because you bring charges, you lose, and then later on the kids show up, the remains are found, right? There's other charges that the federal government could bring against them, predicate charges. But at the end of the day, these kids, you can't believe, we're the state that set a precedent with this case. We set a precedent, for example, with the Crumbly case, right? When the Crumbly case was brought in Michigan, people thought that was a crazy move, but now it's a precedent that's actually helping other states. Set a precedent here. If you have custody of your kids and they disappear with no explanation, and the villain behind it is a parent who's lied multiple times, set the precedent that you're going to bring murder charges. And if you convict that person, and then the kids, if an Amish wagon shows up at Tanya's house and drops off her adult children, and it turns out that we convicted this person incorrectly, he'll be out of jail in 30 days because his kid showed up, right? And by convicting him, then you're giving him even more, motivation and incentive to fess up and see what happened to these kids. So you should bring, there's all the reasons to bring the charges and no reasons not to bring the charges, because at the end of the day, if you're worried about anything, about losing or double jeopardy applying, well, this guy's going to be out of jail at the end of 2025. And so what's the point of even waiting on it? You have all these immense powers. Use them. At the end of the day, can you imagine this villain getting out of jail and showing up on podcasts and talking?
Oh, I think he might. I think he might.
Yeah.
Paulette, let me ask you, though, because I think Mike makes a great point here. Prosecutors are always concerned because you only get one bite at the apple. He may have crossed state lines here. There may be a reason for legitimate federal jurisdiction as well.
I agree, definitely. But I will say, obviously, prosecutors don't like to file charges and then lose. This is a case where it's solely circumstantial. And I think jurors, especially here in Michigan, in the number of homicide trials I have tried, I think they look for more. I think it's a time in society where we're all watching these shows every night, these Law and Order shows where there's DNA evidence and there's this type of evidence and that type of evidence and video evidence, and jurors ask for more than circumstantial evidence. So, although really, what other explanation could there be?
Right, and he's a real villain here, a real villain. Mike Jaffer, Paulette Lofton, thank you so much for your great insight.
Thank you.
John Skelton is selfish. He's stubborn. He served many years in prison already, but will never truly tell anyone what happened. He's not going to say what happened to Tanner, Alexander, and Andrew. When he gets out of prison, he'll remain stubborn, but will always be looking over his shoulder because, as we said, there's no statute of limitation for murder, and he could get charged at any time. The question is, when will that time come? I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.